Welcome to the first ever episode of the Alex and Andrew podcast. I'm Andrew.
I'm Alex, and we are so excited to be here. We're feeling great, and we've been friends for a while now, so we thought it's about time we do this.
Yeah, it's about time. There's a lot. There's some podcasts out in the music space, but I felt like we could put a unique twist on the music space, and I think we have similar beliefs about music, and then also like some adjacent beliefs about music that I would really I cannot wait to dive into.
I totally agree. I think that'll make for great discussion.
Yeah,
just like our different perspectives, but also I think we both bring a similar vibe and approach to our music and just to any projects we do. So we're gonna bring that to this podcast, make it a whole ton of fun, and also just as insightful as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because we've been through it. Like I've been doing this for like over 10 years, and I've been in the music space for over 10 years, and you've been in the music space for probably even longer than that.
Well,
honestly,
it depends what you consider the music space, right? Because like probably I don't know. Are you like me where you started in a band as like a teenager already?
Yes.
Yeah. So if that counts, it's been a long time. Professionally working in the music space, it's been. I mean, it depends what you count as professional, right? The first demo you uploaded to YouTube or the first paid job you got. But
I consider the first paid job you get as like, because professionalism is by definition like I am doing this professionally for somebody else. I am hired.
I am hired. The really interesting part is like if that's the definition of professionalism. So if being a professional means you are hired, right? The first job you were hired for means you're doing professional work because you were hired. However, one job of experience does that make you a professional? So it's like professionalception.
Oh, that's a really good point. That is a professionalception. I love that word too, because you could be perceived as a professional and still not have the best product. But dude, to be completely honest with you, I don't think it matters that much either at the end of the day, because I know people that are better than me that get clients that I don't, and that's fine because they're better at being top of mind, and they're better at maybe marketing themselves, and maybe they're a better people person than I am. Maybe they're like way more fun to hang with than I am, and that's why they get clients instead of me. You know what I mean? Like that could really be a good reason why.
They've positioned themselves within the professionalception that way, and it's something everyone can get better at, and it's something that neither of us started with. I can't believe we just made this word up.
So how about this though? Well, none of us started with it, right? But then you get there. How do you start with the this is the whole concept of this episode is how do you start getting a perceived professionalism, what was the word again?
I don't even remember. We'll have to go. It was like professionalception.
Professionalception. Yeah.
Imagine if we named the episode that.
We can't even remember exactly.
Oh,
Apparently,
man.
It wasn't that good of a word if we forgot it already.
It can't be that good. But the whole idea was getting started and just starting. And to get to where you are, you had to just start something. To get to where I am, I had to just start something. And anyone in the music industry ever just had to start. And I think we both have some interesting stories. And I'd love to hear about yours and just talk about kind of how we got to where we are now and how we ended up sitting on this podcast together.
Yeah. So I guess I'll go first with this. This whole concept of music has been around like literally since the moment I could even crawl. I mean, like I've always been in the music space that way. Always been a music lover. Let me say that. I've always been a music lover, and I always was looking to play instruments, to do my own thing. And the one thing about like myself is, and I think that maybe a lot of other musicians have this as well. I never really grabbed a guitar, like because guitar is my main instrument. I never grabbed a guitar with the intention of always playing somebody else's music. I always had the intention of being able to play my own someday, or to be in the creative process of writing. Like I either wanted to be in the room writing music, I wanted to do that, or I wanted to be like, and obviously you have to learn other people's songs in order to even learn chords and scales and how to even play
Smoke
guitar.
on the water.
Yeah, Smoke on the Water, the first song that everybody learns how to play. But then, so I grabbed a guitar, loving it, and then I really started getting good at guitar when I thought it was going to get me girls. Like, honest to God, that's the truth.
That's what did it.
That's what did it. I was like, at the time, I was like, if I learn how to play like Slash from Guns N' Roses, I will be perceived as somebody who just needs to have a girlfriend all the time. And so and I totally thought that would work. Come to find out, 4 chords is more than enough to woo at least my wife. And she is much more inspired by lyrics and melodies than she is by my incredible Slash playing on the occasions. But and then I started realizing that when I started playing with a band, my brother played drums, and I play guitar. My older sister played piano. My younger sister would sing. And so my dad would grab the bass on occasion, play some bass notes. And we also had a really good friend of ours who was a bass player. And so we started this like family band and continued on with this.
Family band. I love that.
Yeah, it was a good time. We played all free shows. They were all free shows, but it was fun though, and I enjoyed it.
Did you ever play like family reunions? Like if you
yes.
like, I also have a very musical family, and like every family event, it's like there's some type of, you know, little gazebo or little corner set up where all that, you know, there's a drum kit and instruments. Like, was it like that for you?
Yeah, dude, seriously, like 2 weeks ago, I had my family reunion, and we all, like, my brother brought his drum set, I brought my guitar, I brought a couple guitars, and the family friend brought a bass. Dude, it's funny because like he's a family friend, still goes to our family reunions. He's like just a really close friend. Like that's just how it is. And so he brought his bass and everything like that. And dude, it was a great time. And so we just had a blast with it and just played music. And we got to a point where we wanted to go record our own stuff. And my local church had they had a mixing board. The church that we had gone to, especially at the time, we could record individual inputs, but it all went to a 2-track recorder, because that's how we would record. Like, dude, I kid you not, we would record every single Sunday to a CD, and then we would print the CD, and then the following week we would give out those CDs of last week's recording. Like that's how we would.
So was that like your first experience with recording and? In
yes.
a sense,
that was my first experience with it.
I love that.
And there was no mixing, there's no adjusting, there's no anything afterwards. Once it hit the mixing board, which didn't have anything other than EQ, it had EQ, it had a low, mid, and high, and then it had a low cut button. That was it. And so, like, obviously, your gain and your fader. So there was no effects. There was nothing. And I realized, like, trying to get. We would press, like, I would run it up to the balcony area. I would press record, and then I would run downstairs as fast as I could to get up there and start playing with the rest of my family members. Yeah, get on stage to play. And that was my first experience with recording, and I realized that wasn't conducive. That wasn't like the way you were supposed to record. Like that was pretty obvious to me at that point. And so I wanted to record my own stuff and looked into the cost of recording studios and a drive because I literally live in the middle of nowhere. And so it was a significant drive for me and my family to go, and the recording studios were pretty expensive. And so I realized I have a laptop at home. Let me give this a shot. And I started in there's this free was Audacity, and realized and
one of the best DAWs ever.
the best DAW ever.
You know, I actually used it for a project recently, but that's a story for another time.
Oh my gosh, dude! The fact that you're a Pro Tools user and had to pull out Audacity just makes so much sense.
Well, it's.
I'm joking.
Well, it's the thing. I actually needed a setting that only Audacity has, because it's just a setting that's not relevant to any other DAW, and it was this really weird format, and it would take me way too long to describe the project, but
that's incredible, dude. That's incredible. I love that. So Audacity, it really actually is a fantastic piece of software there, but I realized that, I mean, Audacity is for recording audio, not necessarily processing and editing and mixing and all this other stuff. And so that's when I got into GarageBand, and then I started making projects.
Made the leap to GarageBand.
Made the leap to GarageBand, and then shortly after that made the leap to Logic, and started. I actually released my first song ever with me and my buddy, like a little duo, in in GarageBand. I was using GarageBand at the time when I released this demo, and we put it out on Spotify and everything, and I was still using GarageBand sounds, stock sounds, and everything. And I got to a point where I upped to Logic, and then people started asking me what I was doing, and I still like really didn't know what I was doing. But I was like, let's just go, let's have fun.
You just started. You said, screw it, I'm gonna upgrade, and I don't know what any of this stuff does, but you just have to take that first step, you know?
I had to take the first step into that. And the first step, it wasn't very, like, it sounds linear when I say this now. It sounds like, oh, I started learning how to play guitar, and then I had a band, and we wanted to get it recorded. But at the time, it felt so back and forth all over the place. I didn't know what I was doing. And I kid you not, I remember typing things into Google of things I didn't even know how to explain. Like, the first time I had ever heard of vocal chop, this was like the rise of EDM. I didn't even know what a vocal chop was called. So I was on Google. I specifically remember, like, dude, I remember even the pants I was wearing at this time, because I remember being like, the pants I was wearing, the specific pants, because I remember the feeling of being so frustrated that I could hear the sound and I wanted to know what it was, but I didn't even know what to ask Google. The unknown was the most frustrating thing to me, and it always has been the most frustrating thing to me. And ever since then, I've been just on a journey to constantly find what those unknown unknowns are, and to learn all about it, and to just have fun with it. I ended up getting a mentor, which was the best thing I ever did in my life. It was just a real good friend of mine who had been doing this for longer than I had, and I could ask him what something was so I could Google it for myself later on, so I wasn't taking like a whole bunch of his time.
So you at least knew what something was, because you didn't even know the what up until that point.
Yeah, I didn't even know. Like, a compressor was like, I was like, how do I get my quiet parts louder and my louder parts quieter? Like, why? Or I didn't even know that. I was just like, hey, why are my vocals sounding like they're all over the place? And he was like, that you'd probably need to use a compressor.
Dude, I literally was in that exact same position. The first songs I ever or some of the earlier songs that I had recorded were in GarageBand, and it was with my cousin. And literally, I didn't know a compressor even existed. Yeah. I didn't know. And so what I did was just I recorded the dry vocal and literally automated everything with an automation line. And all I would have had to do is put on a compressor, and it would have done exactly what I was doing. But I automated all my compression and did it by hand. And then I remember showing my cousin the session, and he was like, "Whoa, man, you're a wizard."
Whoa, man, look at this.
Oh my God, I can't even breathe, because the funny part is I was the exact opposite.
You were absolutely not a wizard. But dude, that's when somebody sends me a project file and it looks like, God. And they have like so many tracks that just didn't need to be separate tracks. Oh my gosh, dude!
It doesn't mean you're a wizard, because it looks crazy. It means there's probably an easier way to do it that you didn't know about, which makes you a non-wizard.
Meaning you need to go talk to a wizard to see at least what's up.
But here's the thing about that: him just saying that to me made me, like, even though I didn't know what a compressor was, even though I did all that ton of work automating it, it made it all worth it, because I was like, I just made something sound cool that no one else knew how to make it sound like that. Even though I did it wrong, I was like, this is all I ever want to do. I want to become a better wizard.
Yep. And quote unquote wrong, because honestly, before compressors existed, that's what they did. They were fader riders,
Yeah. And still like, automation is, even after compressing stuff, we still use automation, because there's the macro volume changes you want to make, and sometimes the compressor still doesn't do the job entirely. Like, you can clip gain a track so much, it's just the way the vocal hits the mic. Sometimes you're still going to automate it after. So
So
I was only partially wrong, but yeah, you reminded me of that just with GarageBand and
that's
not
amazing.
Knowing what you don't know. Oh,
yeah, I knew what a delay was, but I also didn't know how to add plugins in GarageBand at the time. I just knew like the presets. So for some of the songs that I was writing, and dude, literally got released on Spotify, I was like, I had this vocal line, and then I would take that vocal line and I would sing. I'm holding up my phone like it's a microphone. I literally have a microphone right here. And I was holding up the microphone, and I would like record another track, and I would sing the delay part because I didn't even know how to add a delay throw. So I would just sing the delay part after, and I would be like, your name, your name. Your name. Like the whole time, dude, I had no idea what I was doing. But of course, once again, like my brother comes in the room and he's like, dude, that's just sick. That's wild. So I want to know your like how it started for you, because I feel like we started in similar paths of like in a band wanting to record our own stuff.
The really interesting thing is, like, I mean, we all started doing so many things wrong, but it's almost like you kind of have to go through that phase to get to the, the promised land of getting better at recording, better at mixing and stuff. And I think like definitely something like a mentor, like you had, really, really speeds that up. Yeah, I did some audio education as well. And that sped up a lot of things for me. And so like learning those things is good. But where I started, it was literally the exact same thing. Like I started playing guitar when I was 9. I started playing piano at 6. Piano was kind of my main instrument for a while, but then when I found guitar became the thing. And then I had this it was made by, I think it was Roland. It was like, what was it called? It was called like the BR600 or something. And it was this little digital recorder, and it had a guitar jack and like a built-in mic, like not a good mic, like a little, like, don't even know how to describe it, like literally built into the unit. And it's this little digital recorder that was like this big, and it had 6 faders on it, so you could make 6 tracks. And I remember, like, this was the earliest days of me recording. It wasn't even into a DAW, it was into this little recorder. And I would make like whole songs on there, and there was some way that you could export the stems and stuff and get them later, but I couldn't even figure that out. And then eventually I came across GarageBand. Like, do you remember the days of like being in school, and it's like there's a break or it's lunch or something, and somehow, or you're in the library supposed to be working, but instead you pull up Photo Booth and you're making like the weird, like your face is twisting up and you're like crying, laughing with your friends because like that's what was funny at the time. And then I stumbled across GarageBand, and I literally remember being in like grade 7 and everyone's on Photo Booth and I'm in GarageBand, like just looping the Apple loops over and over and making like some dance track. Yeah. And then from there it's like realizing, oh, I can record into this too. And then came along, like, I was in a couple different bands at the time. I was in a band with like my sister and a family friend, and then again my sister and like 2 cousins, and then I was like writing songs for both of these bands, and it was all I wanted to do was just music. And then it got to a point where, okay, I'm recording into GarageBand now. I'm doing some mixing. None of it's good. Like, it all sounds horrible, right? Yeah. My microphone at the time was just the computer microphone. So it's like all the vocals, even the guitars. Like, dude, literally what I would do is use the computer microphone, and it's like, okay, it's time to record a guitar part. And I'd make an empty audio track. I'd put the computer next to the amp on the floor.
Oh my
word. Put a blanket over the amp and the computer. I'm not recommending this to anyone. But
I think that goes without saying at this point in time, but yeah.
It's so bad. Put a blanket over the computer and the amp, thinking that's going to help. Just and then hit it, like crawling with my head and my finger under the blanket, hitting record, and then sneaking out and like playing the part with headphones.
Oh my word!
I don't even know, man. But it came a long way because like I stuck with it, and then eventually my GarageBand stuff started sounding okay, and I got a song from that I did in GarageBand with another one of my cousins. Got a lot of cousins, and they're all musical, and it went on radio.
Wow.
And it was like, it wasn't like a radio hit, but it played once or maybe twice or maybe 3 times on a local radio station. And it was kind of like just a thing because we knew someone that was the host of the station, and they were just like, hey, let's listen to like this local track. And we made it as like kind of a song to raise awareness for some of the forest fires that were happening in Canada at the time, something along those lines. And literally from there, it was like, wow, I had a song on radio. Like, oh my God. And it wasn't my best recording. It wasn't my best work. But all of a sudden, like, I started getting this empowerment to take the next step and the next step and the next step. And it wasn't like a radio hit, but like as soon as you kind of like get a glimpse of like someone else hearing your work, it was like addicting for me. And then I made it my mission to, from there, I was like, I want to get really good at this recording thing. So I got, I got my first condenser microphone, all the money I ever saved for anything. I never bought like, I wasn't buying games and all sorts of things like maybe other kids my age where I was buying like one channel preamp, like $30 headphones, like my first condenser mic, which I saved up for. I brought that condenser mic home was so pumped about it as if it were like a brand new like Les Paul or like Strat or something. Like I was like that about recording gear. And it was so exciting to me. And then by the end of high school, I had recorded like a whole ton of stuff for, all the different bands I was in. And it got time where, you got to, figure out what you're doing with your life, just that pressure you kind of feel towards the end of, you're 18, 19, and it's like, do I go to university? Do I go to college? Do I work? What do I do? And so for some reason, I was like afraid to do the music thing because I think it was maybe I didn't want to fail. Because I loved it so much. I'm still trying to figure out why, but I decided to, I even got into a music school that I applied for because I really wanted to study music formally, but I ended up being kind of chickening out of it and going to university for business and economics. And I was good at it and it went well, but by the end of the first year, I kind of knew I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. And so my cousin, who's 1 year younger than me, was looking at schooling and programs at the time to apply for something. And I was already in my first year, something I knew I was kind of in the wrong field. And he showed me this 2-year audio program at a school called Fanshawe. And it turns out it's a really, it's a program with a history of music production and recording that started in the 1970s, and a very unique program, like one of the only of its type, and renowned, at least in Canada, as being one of these few programs that actually teaches you how to record, and analog gear and learning how to use Pro Tools and all this stuff. So I applied. It was pretty competitive, but I got in and I made the decision to transfer over there. And by transferring, I was able to take 1 credit with me from my 1 year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And at the time, like I still like, I thought academics was everything. And I learned later that, in terms of getting work in the music industry, your college marks don't matter. It's your work, it's your portfolio, it's your attitude, especially. And the quality of your work. But I grinded it out and learned everything I could and soaked up everything I could in those 2 years while I was there studying audio. I ended up studying audio post-production a little bit more. And then I went out into the industry, freelancing, and kind of, I did the whole thing of just freelancing, recording local artists around town, dragging mics, backpacks of microphones and stuff all over the city, doing random kind of odd jobs and barely making any money doing it, like eating a whole ton of rice and scraping by. And I did that for a while, until the point where I had to really figure things out at the beginning of the pandemic and figure out like all that shut down for me. Recording local artists and everything when the pandemic started, it was like, you can't do any of this anymore. Or at least that's how it was here in this part of Canada. We weren't sure what was going on. So I had to find a different avenue to do that. And that's when I turned to online freelancing and starting to offer mixing. And then everything changed for me from there. But yeah, man, it's definitely been an interesting path of growth and just, being not afraid just to take that next step, even if it's not the right one, just like taking one forward, and because you learn as you go and you have to just move forward in some way, even if it's to take a step in the wrong direction to learn that you're on the wrong direction. You know what I mean? Did that happen along your journey at all?
Yeah, I think there's always those paths that you go down, but I do want to say something about this aspect though, is because with going down those paths, I don't necessarily think that you need to be right all the time. I think you just need to be directionally correct. Like if I take a couple wrong turns on my cross country journey from Pennsylvania to California, did I really mess up that much? You know what I mean?
I completely know what you mean, because you'll still end up in California at the end.
Exactly.
You kind of keep redirecting until you're in the direction you generally intended, and then you get to the destination either way.
Yeah. And
I like that, man. That's really cool.
And the fun part is I could take the highway and go there, but I miss the scenic routes. I miss the experiences, the life experiences that I get by getting there. You have to make mistakes in order for things to really to hit home. It wasn't until I had recorded a decent amount of vocalists before I realized acoustic treatment even mattered. And if somebody would have just told me this is so important, like this is the most important thing that you need to do is to get a clean recording at the source, I wouldn't have learned those lessons. I would have just done it because I thought that's what it needed to be, and I wouldn't have learned actually why it matters. And you have to make those mistakes along the way. You have to press record under the blanket of the the computer and sitting next to the amp to get that to happen. You have to sing those delay parts on your song to even understand why things work the way they are, why they're so important, how to even create delay throws. You have to understand how a compressor works. You got a better understanding of how a compressor works just by automating that vocal for the first time. Like you had a true understanding of what a compressor was. As soon as you found out what it was, you're like, this makes sense. And I have to tell people
exactly, because like the slope of the how steep the slope of the automation I drew in, I was like, oh, this is the attack knob,
Yes.
It's all those things, right?
Yeah, and that's a perfect way of explaining that. But you learn that though, and you learn that through those trial and error. You learn that from just doing it and just starting and just going for it. I don't think you can really truly understand something. I heard this. I was listening to a finance podcast, and they said something I thought was super interesting. And I kind of like put a little twist on it, but they're like, if it's fancy, probably don't go for it, is what they were saying. And I want to put a twist on that because I have found fancy things in my life that had worked. And I just kind of went down that path, and then they became less fancy. And I think if you're trying a new fancy plugin or trying a new fancy compressor or trying these new fancy techniques, if it's fancy to you, you don't understand it well enough. Like Soothe 2 was really fancy to me until I understood how it worked, and then I understood that I could do a similar thing, not quite to the extent of Soothe 2. I'm using it as a good example though of like just dynamic EQ, and like and it's just makes so much sense that way. If you don't
understand dynamic EQ first, Soothe 2 is going to be it's this whole other level. It's the whole argument of plugins and understanding your stock plugins first before biting because if you buy the fanciest looking plugin, this is the whole argument of instead of taking that first step and just starting with the tools you have, it's saying, oh, well, he has all the fancy plugins, so that's why his stuff sounds good.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, his stuff sounds good because he learned his stock plugins as good as he possibly could first. And then just because he knew them so well, he bought a fancier plugin, or she or whoever's mixing bought a fancier plugin because that's a logical next step. I know the tools I have really well, and because I have this deep understanding, I can now understand something that's a little more complex. And it's just like that constant stacking. And so no one starts with the fancy stuff. You have to build there one step at a time, and you have to learn your stock plugins, for example. You know what I mean?
I think a perfect example of this is, I think we all know that one person who has like a $5,000 guitar that only knows 4 chords. I feel
I
feel like everybody knows that one person. Sure. And like this, in a deep sense, you're like, why in the world? Like I am crushing it over here.
And so the great guitar player who has, the budget brand guitar is still going to sound way better than the great guitar player, but the guy holds the pick kind of funny and has some strings are muted under the fingers. You know what I mean?
Yep, exactly.
The fancy guitar with the nice
fancy
strings
guitar.
and the
It's the same thing it's exactly it's the same thing in the music industry with the plugins. And the thing is too, you don't understand what you don't know until you just start. And so that once again, you have to just start. I was mixing on a PA speaker because it was the best speaker I had at the time, and that was the worst decision I think I had ever made on mixing like the first EP. It was in mono, by the way, too. It was a mono PA speaker because I was like, I saw on YouTube that you can't mix in headphones and you gotta check your mixes on all these other places. And at the time, like I should have just listened. I should have just mixed on my Apple earbuds. I should have, but I did not, of course. And so it's just the way it was. But at the end of the day, you just got to start. That's all you can do. You start, and then you innovate after that. You know what you don't know after you start. You can't be looking for information. You can't be looking for the next fancy thing, the next fancy trick. You just got to start and go. Get directionally correct. It is hard to steer a parked car.
That's all you have to do. You just have to push the ball down the hill or jump into the cold water. Take that first step. And that's what we're doing with this podcast and this episode is we just said we just have to start.
Just start.
Hopefully that can be a good message for anyone else, because you and I, we're not special. You know, we both are at a point now where we're doing professional work in the industry and we'd be considered music industry professionals under some definition, and getting to do it for work in a sense. But we were just guys who decided to start.
Yeah.
And there are a whole ton of excuses we could have had along the way, you know?
Yep. But we didn't let any of that hold us down. And I think the best thing that you can do for somebody, if you are somebody who's like this, and I feel for you because I was like this too, where you're like, I don't have the credibility. Why would anybody want to listen to my stuff? I think you just need to find what to do along the way. Those voices are going to come up. That's okay. Like, if you hear that, it means you're growing. I mean that truly. If you hear those voices in your head saying that you're not good enough, why would anybody listen to you? I don't have any credit. Why should I even start this? It means that you're growing, and that's a good thing. And you just need to find something to do in the meantime to keep yourself busy until eventually you look back and go, wow, I made it halfway across the country, and the view is gorgeous.
Yeah, because and even though the end destination, let's say it's like Pennsylvania to California, you're going to find mountains along the way. You're going to find valleys. You're going to find waterfalls, you know, you're going to find all sorts of beautiful things along the way that makes the ride amazing. And you can't get to any of that without just like starting the car, putting your foot on the gas, and just going down the road and ignoring that voice that's like trying to hold you back. Because anyone who's gotten anywhere in the music industry has had that voice in their head, that same one that probably has held us up at some points and could hold up anyone getting started.
Yep.
But the difference is you ignore it and you push through. And if you can just do that one thing, it doesn't have to be the right step forward. It just has to be some step forward, some imperfect action, just to move in the general direction. And as you do that, you start to find that, you know, you funnel into the direction you're supposed to be on one way or another, as long as you're going forward.
Yep. As long as you're going forward, you're heading the right direction. And it's never a waste of time. Going down the more scenic route and getting a little lost is never a waste of time, because you learn things that you never would have been able to learn without going down those paths.
Yeah, man. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's the goal of what we're going to try to do in these conversations, is just to be something that continues to move everyone forward.
Yep, and continues to move people forward and hopefully inspire them. And if this podcast has inspired you so far, the only way podcast grows are through word of mouth. So if you really enjoyed this, send this with a producer friend, because I feel like everybody who's a producer, or at least a musician, has a producer friend that would probably enjoy some part of this episode.
Yes, that would be amazing. Please share, because word of mouth is going to be extremely important to getting this message out, and hopefully having as many as possible join us on this journey of all getting better together.
Yeah. it's been great hanging out with you for the last
Andrew,
half hour.
It's always a pleasure, my friend. I appreciate you a whole ton. I always learn something new. You know, I always learn something new with you.
Same with you, and it's just gonna keep going. So, if you like this episode, share it with a friend, and definitely come back for more episodes. We are gonna be dropping these weekly. So have a fantastic day.
Lots more coming. We'll see you in the next one.
See you in the next one.